Buongiorno.
Good morning. Good morning and welcome to this introductory session of the 15th International Congress of Justice Ministers, titled No Justice Without Life. We obviously have interpretation available. Interpretation should be working into English, French, and Portuguese. No justice without life for a world without the death penalty. We are happy to welcome you to this very prestigious hall of the parliamentary groups of the Chamber of Deputies of the Italian Parliament, which was so generously given to us by the Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies. I'd like to greet the honorable ministers and delegates from 15 participating countries, the ambassadors and diplomats present from many different countries. Thank you for joining us. I also wish to greet all of the youth from the schools, including the Manara School, who are joining us this morning. And I will now read the message sent to us by President Fontana. I wish to cordially greet the authorities and participants at the 15th International Congress of Justice Ministers, promoted by the community of Sant'Egidio, an event which is an opportunity to reflect on the absolute value of life and on the need to abolish the death penalty worldwide. According to most recent figures, the death penalty still exists in the legislation of over 50 states, and last year we had the highest number of death sentences recorded since 2015, for a total of 1,518 death penalties which were carried out in 15 different countries. These horrifying figures show that despite the important goals reached over the decades, there is still much to be done towards the final disappearance of a definition which goes against the most basic principles of humanity and the very idea of justice. It is therefore crucial to promote everywhere and anywhere debates such as today's, with the goal of intensifying our efforts to stimulate things from the political, legal, and cultural point of view, so that globally we can achieve this authentic pillar of civilization. Currently, the fourth comma of Article 27 of Italy's Constitution, as amended by our constitutional law, clearly states that the death penalty is forbidden. Furthermore, during the session held on the 5th of June 2013, the Foreign Affairs and European Commission's Committee of the Chamber of Deputies unanimously approved a resolution on the topic of the universal abolition of the death penalty, thereby asking the government to intensify its actions for global abolition. This is a very ambitious challenge, for the success of which we need to have the involvement of all players, and therefore my hope is that events such as these can significantly enrich the debate on such an important topic as a way of strengthening the dialogue between institutions, politics, and civil society. And with this hope in mind, I wish you the very best for your initiative. Signed, President Lorenzo Fontana. And we would now like to give the floor to Dagmar Schmidt-Tartagli, Deputy Head of Division for Peace and Human Rights of the Swiss Confederation. The Swiss Confederation is a sponsor of the Congress of Justice Ministers, and the Deputy Head of Division for Peace and Human Rights, Dagmar Tartagli, has held a number of different positions from 2001 to 2015. She was Ambassador of Switzerland to the Republic of Korea, and we are pleased to give her the floor.
Grazie mille.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Distinguished colleagues, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to speak on behalf of Switzerland to reiterate our commitment towards a goal we share, namely a world without the death penalty. I would like to begin by thanking organizers and all of the countries represented here today. Switzerland is a long-standing partner of the community of Sant'Egidio, and we are honored to continue in our multi-year cooperation together with the Republic of Italy, Monaco, and the European Union. I would like to express my sincere gratitude and extend my warm greetings to Marco Impagliazzo, President of the Community of Sant'Egidio, and I also wish to extend a warm welcome to the Swiss Ambassador to the Holy See, Manuel Lam-Kuber.
We meet at a time of paradoxical developments. On the one hand, 2024 saw the highest number of executions since 2015, and the trends observed so far in 2025 are equally troubling. In several countries, the death penalty is again being used as a tool of repression and social control. This has been evident in the Middle East, with an extremely high number of executions in Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Yemen. We are further deeply concerned by the lifting of the moratorium in the Democratic Republic of Congo and by an ongoing legislative process in Israel to reintroduce capital punishment. On the other hand, the number of countries that retain and carry out executions continues to decline. This positive trend must be protected. I would like to congratulate Zimbabwe, which abolished the death penalty shortly after our last Congress, an encouraging sign of the steadily growing abolitionist movement in Africa. It shows that strong states are those willing to adapt and embracing change. And it is a special pleasure to meet here with His Excellency Siyambi Siyambi, Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs of Zimbabwe. The question is therefore, how do we re-energize the global abolitionist movement? Before outlining Switzerland's contribution, allow me to briefly recall our path. Internationally, Switzerland first addressed abolition in its first human rights policy report in 1982. In 1983, we helped draft Protocol number 6 to the European Convention on Human Rights. At that time, we had abolished the death penalty in ordinary criminal law since 1942, but not yet in military law. Full abolition came in 1992. From then on, universal abolition became a core objective of our foreign policy. The reason is clear. Our Constitution states that every human being has the right to life and that the death penalty is prohibited. This principle guides our actions. Sharing this history matters because abolition must be seen not only as a human rights goal, but as an investment in justice, stability, and international cooperation. Switzerland is ready to support any state willing to consider steps toward abolition. Our efforts are set out in our action plan for the universal abolition of the death penalty 2024 to 2027, which focuses on 3 areas. First, diplomatic engagement. We work directly with states to limit the use of the death penalty in line with international law. For example, around 40% of documented executions worldwide are for drug-related crimes. Yet, the death penalty for such offenses is clearly incompatible with human rights standards. It also does not deter drug crime more effectively than other severe penalties. Abolishing it would improve international cooperation in the fight against trafficking. Second, strengthening the normative framework. A few weeks ago, together with partner states, Switzerland again introduced the Human Rights Council resolution on the question of the death penalty. Its adoption represents an important reaffirmation of international standards at a time when consensus building is increasingly difficult. This year, it focused on the right to seek pardon or commutation and the right of appeal, fundamental safeguards that must apply universally. Third, strengthening international collaboration. And here I would like to zoom on the important work with civil society. Civil society organizations like the Comunità di Sant'Egidio have been indispensable in advancing abolition around the world. They convene key actors, document violations, provide legal and psychological support to individuals on death row, shed light on discriminatory patterns, and inform and mobilize public opinion. Their proximity to affected communities allows them to identify opportunities for progress that governments alone may not see. For this reason, Switzerland supports international, regional, and local NGOs whose work strengthens the global abolitionist movement. And we do that since 1982. So also this pluriannual cooperation is really inscribed in this policy of our foreign human rights policy. Their continued engagement is essential for meaningful and lasting change. Despite all our collective efforts, we must acknowledge that the Middle East and North Africa remain underrepresented in abolitionist discussions, including here today. We must therefore intensify outreach to this region and rebuild the trust needed for genuine dialogue. Stimati onorevoli, eccellenze,
distinguished representatives, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, responding to violence with the death penalty authorized by the state does not bring justice, nor does it bring stability. Quite the opposite, in fact. It deepens the cycles of violence, generating new injustice. Our duty, therefore, is that of guaranteeing that the global trend towards abolition continues with a renewed commitment through coordinated action and by a shared understanding of the benefits of justice and safety. Through all this, it will be possible to achieve further progress. As we look to the future, I'd like to conclude by congratulating the Universal Abolitionist Movement. And once again, I'd like to underscore the fundamental role played by civil society. Without their constant commitment, many of the progress made in recent decades would not have been possible. And I sincerely hope then when we meet again next year, we will be able to congratulate yet another country which will have taken the brave decision to abolish the death penalty. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tartaglia. Thank you very much for also reminding us of Switzerland's commitment in the campaign for the abolition of the death penalty. Thank you for mentioning your support to civil society, which we are grateful for. And we hope that your commitment, which began in 1982, may continue in the future so that we can at least accomplish the universal moratorium on the death penalty. Thank you very much indeed. I'd now like to give the floor to Anne Eastwood, Ambassador of the Principality of Monaco, to take the floor. Madam Ambassador, you have the floor.
Buongiorno a tutti, good morning, bonjour, et je vais profiter de la traduction pour continuer en français.
I'd like to take advantage of the fact that we have simultaneous interpretation available to continue in French. Chairperson, distinguished ministers, representatives of the authorities present, guests, dear friends, I'm honored to take the floor before all of you to welcome you to this 15th International Congress of Justice Ministers titled No Justice Without Life. First of all, allow me to express my gratitude to the community of Sant'Egidio, the commitment of which and the ability to unite allows us to meet every year. This is an event which sets another milestone towards this universal goal we're all committed to. We are here today not because the world is perfect. We are here because we believe we can improve the world, a vision which is already a victory. Since last year, the abolitionist movement has made further progress, with new countries which worked towards abolition. Others consolidated their moratoria. Others still ratified the international tools, making their giving up the death penalty irrenounceable. At the end of 2024, a historic majority of states, 130 states, voted in favor of the General Assembly's of the UN General Assembly's resolution calling for a universal moratorium on executions. A strong message which shows that the world's conscience continues to strengthen itself around the obvious principle according to which a justice which kills can never be a justice which protects. Despite that, the most recent Amnesty International report depicts some steps back which we are concerned of, including an increase in death penalties, which in 2024 reached once again the highest level over the past 10 years, although they are being committed in a very small minority of states. In regions affected by security crises, the death penalty was sometimes reactivated or extended. Political tension, the rise of criminal populism, hate speech, the search for swift responses or to the desire to control find fertile ground for the death penalty in a global context in which the rule of law has been weakened. We have to admit that. We're also seeing a weakening of international laws on human rights. That's why we have to continue to be vigilant to avoid any steps back. The death penalty is the oldest illusion of law, the illusion according to which we can defend life and better protect society through death. Although history teaches us that the death penalty doesn't prevent anything, it doesn't repair anything. In fact, it adds to the suffering of the victims, adding suffering of new families, and to the violence of crime, it adds the violence of the state. And in the heart of justice itself, it instills the logic that it wishes to counter. But the abolitionist movement is continuing to make progress because this is a paradox which is no longer tolerable in the modern era. And also because players such as the community of Sant'Egidio, through dialogue and through parallel diplomacy, and by working in the local context, can be innovative to convince the still reluctant countries. The Principality of Monaco is proud to support this effort for the third year in a row in its effort to fully respect life and human dignity. And it continues to be the underlying goal of all of its ethical choices, including those on the more sensitive issues such as abortion or the end of life. Our deep belief is that the right to life cannot be negotiable, nor can it be subordinated to utilitarian approaches. And it is this belief that led us to being one of the first countries to fully abolish the death penalty in 1962. And it continues to drive our international commitment for its universal abolition. Allow me to conclude with a personal memory. My memory of Robert Badinter, who was a key figure in the abolition of the death penalty in France, who entered the Pantheon in October, 44 years after the passing of the law on abolition that he had promoted as Minister of Law. And that was a very important moment for all those who believe in justice as a tool of civilization. His victorious battle, which went against the grain vis-a-vis the public opinion, which used to be in favor of the death penalty, reminds us of the fact that the power to change things sometimes depends on the courage and the determination of a few of us. That's why the presence of many of you here today is so important, and it proves that the world can continue making progress despite crises. It shows that the respect for human life in all circumstances is a universal horizon. And I do hope that this Congress, which every year is a privileged opportunity to assess the progress made and to reaffirm our collective determination, may be the opportunity for a new commitment in this regard. I wish you a fruitful day, and I thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador Anne Eastwood, also for having reminded us of the fact that during the most recent vote at the United Nations, we reached the highest number of votes ever, 130 votes in favor of the moratorium. Thank you very much. Last night at the Colosseum, we gathered with many youth for peace, and we celebrated the cities for peace, the cities against the death penalty, on the anniversary of the abolition of the death penalty in the Grand Duchy of Tuscany in 1776. And at the Colosseum, Youth for Peace launched an appeal to our decision makers, to those who can make the truly important decisions. And what they said was that we youth want a world with no violence, a world which respects the life of everyone. Do not let us grow in a future of fear. Give us a future of peace. And as they turned to the ministers present last night, they also said, we want our voices to be heard. We want to make sure that the voices of those who believe in peace as responsibility are heard. And we'd like to accept their appeal so that we can work to reiterate the fact that there can be no justice without life, to find new ways and new words to reiterate the culture of life. And we can do this by giving the floor to Marco Marazziti, who is the coordinator of the International Campaign for the Abolition of the Death Penalty, promoted by the community of Sant'Egidio for the moratorium of the death penalty, and co-founder of the World Coalition Against the Death Penalty. Thank you, Mario. You have the floor.
Grazie. Grazie Paolo, grazie a voi.
Thank you. Thank you, Paolo. Thank you, everyone, for being here. What a great responsibility to find words to try to change the world on such an important topic. Because we are visionaries, but we are not naive. And a wind of death blows, of summary executions. There's no imagination when it comes to peace. The world has broken down. On the one hand, the number of countries using the death penalty is decreasing, but those who are using it use it more blatantly, with no shame, and more frequently showing violence. 4 capital executions in the world, as we heard, happen in 2 countries, Iran and Saudi Arabia. The US has introduced a new inhuman way of taking one's life, so stifling with nitrogen. You can't do it even with animals. It's forbidden. So we are witnessing this rift in the heart of the world. But actually, everything is clearer, because our battle against the death penalty, to free the world from it, because the death penalty is the epitome of all the violations of human rights, even those who are responsible for perpetrating crimes, is part of a culture of death. So the world is swept away by a wind blowing death. And this is what the youngest generations are asking us to change. They don't want to grow in a world like this. They want to have a world where it is possible to reduce violence and to live for peace. So culture of death, culture of life. Our battle is to help ourselves, to help our countries, and to help the world to grow in a culture of life, to taste again what life means. That after the Second World War seemed to be an aspiration shared by everyone in the world, whereas now we are going back. So in this world, the culture of death is expressed in 292 million people that are using drugs, fentanyl, for example. Only in the US, in the past few years, more than 100,000 deaths every year. Last year, 87,500, and it seemed to be a pretty good result compared with the past. In the world, more than 42% of all capital executions that are known happen due to crimes associated with substance abuse. And the other executions of the countries like Israel that surprisingly want to reintroduce in their legislation the death penalty is for crimes that are related to terrorism. But terrorists, jihadists, or sovereignists, they live off capital punishment. They love death. They are fed by death. Death that they are giving to their enemies. They are not afraid of the death penalty. Terrorists are not afraid of the death penalty. So most of the executions in the world happen for 2 reasons, for which it is pointless. Why are they doing this? To show that something is being done. It's the political use, even more political, of the death penalty. This has nothing to do with the security of citizens, but it rather increases the insecurity. So they don't feel safe, because it says out that in special circumstances, the state can actually order death. Every time a state orders death, those who don't want capital punishment end up being criminals as well. So the whole society is brought down to the level of those who kill. And again, the law for capital punishment is no longer a law, because laws were born to defend life. Laws were introduced and have always been introduced to reduce violence. If a piece of legislation envisages the death penalty, it is actually denying itself its very nature. The law that sets out capital punishment is a contradiction in terms. It's cheating society, so we must help our countries to be safer, to be more secure. So we should also avoid that by accident we end up becoming people sentenced to death. Well, the clearest case, Wao Kakamata in Japan, 48 years in jail as an innocent, sentenced to death due to evidence that was actually designed by the police 10 days after the crime was perpetrated. So 38 years to have his innocence recognized. In the US, there are more than 3,600 people. There have been more than 3,600 people that were actually innocent and were sentenced to death. Since 1972, 201 people have been sentenced to death that have then been released, or after having been killed, they have been recognized as innocent. Justice, just and certain justice, does not exist. 3 times in 4, these innocent people have been sentenced to death based on what eyewitnesses have said, or confessions, or eyewitnesses and confessions together. So everyone thinks it's impossible, that there's actually a judicial mistake there. Well, 3 times in 4, these people were actually innocent, and they have been sentenced nonetheless. There's no such a thing as a perfect justice to defend our citizens. We must help societies not to have the death penalty. And that's the only way to defend them. That's the only way to protect their citizens, to build a culture of life. In the countries where death has been raging for a long time, for example, Europe, 2 world wars, secular wars, Chile, Argentina, Cambodia of the Red Khmers, the Philippines of Marcos dictatorship, South Africa of the apartheid that was finally set free, 2 genocides, Rwanda, Burundi, Timor-Leste, an independence that was very difficult to obtain, Mongolia. Well, these countries, the dictatorships, communism, authoritarianism, Nazism, fascism, well, these countries have survived all this by choosing to renounce the death penalty, because that would have destroyed not only their past but also their future. So let me start from a country I love very much, a country I admire for their respect for beauty and for life in all its forms, from nature, flowers, even the terrible mosquitoes and flies, which is Japan. But Japan has the death penalty and an impenetrable death row, where it happens what I just said about Wakamata. How can we combine these 2 things? Those who become aware of such a condition in the West say, well, it is not possible. Then they try to find excuses. Maybe it's the Japanese culture, but it is not true. This is not true at all, because Japan In 724, so during the first millennium, under the rule of Emperor Shomu, abolished the death penalty, which was then reintroduced for a few years. And back in 1810, an abolitionist era began that lasted for 3 centuries. It was the Heian time. Until 1156, it was the only land without the death penalty. Well, all Western and world countries were practicing it. Italy, Norway, Sweden, everyone was actually using it. So Japan would have a lot to learn from giving up the death penalty, because the death penalty, for example, and I'm saying this to other countries, prevents international judicial cooperation from happening. There are 750 criminals, Japanese criminals, that cannot be extradited. Only 7 in 750, and this is true for all the countries that have the death penalty. It's good for them too, because the biggest crimes against the population are also supranational, so terrorism, drug trafficking, corruption, that is killing and thousands of people and letting them starve. So to fight against these crimes, we need prevention, so we need international cooperation. Abolishing the death penalty helps the countries in this as well, and their population as well. What will happen until 15 years ago, and it seems ordinary, capital punishment, or slavery until 150 years ago, or torture, where all these things are considered to be not acceptable today because global standards have changed. In 1975, 16 countries had actually abolished the death penalty. 183 were still keeping it as part of their legislation. Italy had abolished the death penalty, then fascism reintroduced it. But last year, 15 countries have used the death penalty, and 184 have not used it. So the world is turned upside down. If you consider what was happening 4,000 years ago, even if it is used more and in a more blatant way, but the world has changed. There's a new standard. When people with disabilities were despised, for example, it seemed pretty normal 50 years ago to address them with derogatory words or to call them names. Now we reject it, of course. Standards have changed. The countries that have the death penalty can join forces and can join this global movement with no concerns whatsoever, because in no countries in the world crime has increased due to the abolition of the death penalty. So to conclude, culture of death, culture of life. Let's focus on how to find new motivation to give up this culture of death. I will go back to Japan and to South Korea. Japan records less than 1,000 murders a year. South Korea, even less than that. Well, in percentage, a bit more, because South Korea has 50 million inhabitants and Japan 125. Well, in the US, murders are 12 times higher. So Japan has a marginal problem, a minor problem when it comes to violence causing death, as it happens in Italy. In Italy is 0.5 every 100,000 inhabitants. In Japan and South Korea, 0.5, 0.7. The US, more than 6. And then other countries, Caribbean countries, 10 to 12%, so 20, 30 times higher. It's a minor problem for them. But in Japan, there are 20,000 suicides a year. Culture of life, culture of death. In South Korea, 14,500, which is way more. So South Korea is the second country in the world with the highest number of suicides. Culture of life, culture of death. So we have to try to say in every possible manner that life can never be taken. It is an absolute value, even for those who are sick, even for those who are marginalized, even for those who are being offended. How to make this culture of life prevail? For those who still have the death penalty, I would like to say, well, this battle is a common battle because it is not abolitionists versus retentionists. That's not the threshold dividing us, but the threshold should be between those who work to rebuild a culture of life and those who work to maintain a culture of death. Because the problem is for the countries to have the death penalty in their countries. Is what I said about Japan. We should help each other because there is no opposition, there's no difference between us. How to build this culture of life politically with concrete actions in the laws, in people. Everyone fights against the death penalty by giving up becoming violent in their personal lives. So we must first of all debunk a myth. It's not the families of the victims that are asking for the death penalty. If we don't practice it, we are stripping them of something. No, not true. In most countries, the movements of the families of the victims who are against the death penalty are growing. We, as a state, should give support to the families of the victims. We should compensate them. We should create a law in favor of the victims and their families. Economic support sometimes, support of every other kind, help them with their loneliness, truth, because a death penalty doesn't give truth, and the family of the victims is always looking for truth. They're asking why it happened. They're not calling for another death. And we have to bear in mind that there's no right justice, there's no infallible justice. We should stop telling the families of the victims two lies. First, that healing or closure might happen only with a new death after many years, freezing them in their pain and in their hatred and in this illusion for years. This is what the state does with the death penalty. And the second lie that the state is telling them, those who don't want the death penalty for those who have perpetrated something so violent towards one of my dearest people, well, if they don't want it, it means they didn't love that person. That's not true. So we are here today to work together and to build together these strategies to make the death penalty become part of the horror of the past, just like slavery, like torture, and to build together the reasons to get rid of this culture of death and also be protected from wars. Thank you.
Grazie mille, Mario Marazziti.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding us of this cultural dichotomy, culture of life, culture of death. Thank you for your reflection. Let's stay in the east of the world. Let's listen to a video contribution coming from Japan. Satoshi Mano, an MP from Japan, sent us a video and we want to listen to him. Thank you.
A tutti. Sono uno dei familiari.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a family member, one of the victims, Satoshi Mano. I'm a member of the Japanese Parliament. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to speak at international forums such as this. I lost my irreplaceable eldest son in a car crash. The person responsible was driving under the influence, without a license, no insurance, and the crash happened while he was fleeing after causing another accident. Moreover, he was driving at night, his headlights off, 100 kilometers an hour, in the wrong direction on a one-way road, an extremely dangerous behavior that caused such a terrible crash that my son was thrown 40 meters by the impact. Without killing my son, he fled. My life was shattered in an instant. There was no apology, no compensation from the person. I lost my dreams, my hopes, my future. From that moment on, a long battle began as family member of a victim, and through this experience I realized that it's wrong to believe that the families of the victims want the death penalty. Of course, I felt resentment towards the offender and demanded severe punishment. However, no matter how severe the sentence is, my son's life would never come back. The void in my heart could not be filled. I had no choice but to accept this harsh reality. What bereaved families seek is not to see the perpetrator die. They need support, accountability, prevention of similar incidents from happening again, a social mechanism to restore the victim's life. The death penalty system only fuels feelings of anger and revenge, exacerbating conflicts without bringing comfort to bereaved families. I have strong doubts about whether the state should be able to take life. No matter how terrible the crime is, can we really call it justice when the state kills someone? Aware of the value of life, I have questioned the option of the death penalty. What I want is a society that prevents killings like that of my son. What we need is not a system that takes life in revenge, but a system that protects life and breaks the chain of violence. The abolition of the death penalty does not deny punishment or the severity of punishment. Serious crimes require the most severe punishment. However, this should not mean that the state continues to inflict punishments that take human life. The fact that many countries, including Italy, have taken steps towards abolishing the death penalty is not a denial of the pain felt by the families of the victims. It is a brave step that asks the world what constitutes a state that protects the dignity of life. I don't want to have my son's life be lost in vain. I support the abolition of the death penalty, and I ardently hope that the world will progress towards this in all directions, centered on the dignity of life. Thank you for listening. Let's now give the floor to the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs of Mozambique, Mateus Saizé. The minister has covered several positions. He was judge of the Constitutional Court, jurist at the Bank of Mozambique, and professor of law. Mozambique is a country that is very dear to us, so please, Minister.
Bom dia a todos. Com permissão do presidente.
Good morning. Allow me, first of all, to express my deep gratitude for the honorable invitation to participate in this 15th International Congress of Ministers of Justice. Thank you for this invitation to participate. Under the motto, there is no justice without life. On behalf of the government of Mozambique and on my own behalf, I would like to congratulate the community of Sant'Egidio on organizing this high-level conference. We are very proud to recall that the community of Sant'Egidio played a central role in mediating the peace negotiations between the Mozambican government and Renamo. Negotiations which culminated in the signing of the General Peace Agreement on the 4th of October 1992, now a historic date for Mozambique. Our participation in this Congress as government of the Republic of Mozambique is a sign of recognition and respect for the ongoing contribution of the community of Sant'Egidio to the international campaign for the abolition of the death penalty and the promotion of human rights, strengthening international cooperation and dialogue. I would like to express my deep appreciation for the contributions of the speakers that have taken the floor before me. They have clearly underlined the importance of eradicating the death penalty and reaffirmed the international commitment to the protection of life and the promotion of human rights. It is encouraging to note that even in the face of different realities, we share universal values that strengthen justice, human dignity, and peaceful coexistence among peoples. The motto of this Congress invites us to reflect deeply. Life is the first and most fundamental human right, as it is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Because without life, there is no individual. Without an individual, there are no rights, and without rights, there is no justice. Preserving life is therefore a legal, social, moral, and political responsibility of all countries. The state must be the guardian of life, ensuring that every citizen has the right to life and physical and moral integrity, security, access to justice, education, health, and protection from vulnerabilities. The right to human life cannot and should not be subject to limitations or restrictions, much less conditions imposed on its exercise. The right to live must be exercised freely. Ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution of the Republic of Mozambique of 1990 enshrined the right to life, the prohibition of torture, and determined the abolition of the death penalty. The current constitution, approved in 2004, reaffirms these principles in Article 40, emphasizing that, and I quote, "Every citizen has the right to life and physical and moral integrity and may not be subjected to torture or cruel and inhuman treatment," end of quote. and in the Republic of Mozambique there is no death penalty. Both constitutions guide the interpretation of fundamental rights in harmony with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, ensuring that their compliance is universal and effective. I would also like to highlight that that on 14th May 2019, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights adopted Resolution 416 on the abolition of the death penalty in Africa, and meeting at its 81st ordinary session from 17 October to the 6th of November 2024 in Banjul in the Gambia, reiterated the UN General Assembly's call for a universal moratorium on the death penalty through Resolution 614 of 2024. This convergence reflects the African continent's commitment to human rights and justice based on respect for the right to life. Ladies and gentlemen, the abolition of the death penalty has been progressively adopted by several states, revealing international harmony around the protection of life as a human and fundamental right. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in its Article 3, states that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security. This principle has inspired the codification of human rights treaties at different levels, universal, continental, and regional, and continues to guide public policies and judicial decisions around the world. We recognize, however, that the death penalty still persists in several countries. In this context, it is essential to promote diplomatic and technical dialogue with the states that apply it, encouraging progressive reforms, respecting national sovereignty, but always reaffirming the dignity of human life as a universal value. The historic and fraternal relationship between Mozambique and the community of Sant'Egidio is a concrete example of cooperation that builds peace, strengthens the rule of law, and inspires the international community to seek peaceful and inclusive solutions. We reinforce and reaffirm Mozambique's commitment to the abolition of the death penalty, international dialogue, and the promotion of justice based on respect for the right to life. Evidence of the great connection that we have with the community of Sant'Egidio is through the DREAM program in the field of healthcare to treat HIV and AIDS, along with our Ministry of Health. Protecting human life is the mission and role of every state. Because there is no justice without life, and there is no full life without full respect for human rights. We can achieve justice without sacrificing human life. In closing, I would like to thank you for your hospitality and warm welcome to this beautiful European country and this city, which is particularly rich in history and inspires us to think about life. Thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your remarks. And thank you for mentioning the most recent constitution of Mozambique following a bloody civil war. And thank you for mentioning that the abolition of the death penalty was in fact enshrined in the Constitution. which goes back to what Marco Marazziti was saying earlier, when he mentioned that many countries which faced violence then chose the culture of life, reaffirming the culture of life by abolishing the death penalty. Thank you very much for your statement. Thank you also for reminding us of the fact that even the African Union has embraced the idea and the principle of the universal moratorium on the death penalty, as stated by the United Nations. Thank you very much for your kind presentation. We now wish to give the floor to Diarra Jallow, Minister of Justice of the Gambia, Minister since 2020, and the Minister has contributed to a number of major reforms in Gambia's legal system. He has revitalized the process for the constitutional review, and he also guided the efforts of the Council for Reconciliation and Truth in his country. Mr. Minister, the floor is yours.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished participants, it is a privilege to join this important Congress once again. I thank the government of Italy and the community of Sant'Egidio for their continued leadership in promoting the global movement towards the protection of life and the abolition of death penalty. The Gambia's journey on this issue is rooted in our democratic transition and our commitment to rule of law. Human beings have a fundamental right to life, freedom from torture or inhuman treatment. These values guide our national reforms, including those relating to death penalty. Under our current constitution, death penalty remains permissible for the most serious offenses, but the Gambia has not carried out any execution for more than a decade. In 2018, President Adama Barrow commuted all death sentences to life imprisonment and declared an official moratorium on executions. This moratorium remains firmly in place. Significant progress has also been made at the legislative level with the enactment of our new Criminal Offences Act in 2025. All death penalty provisions were removed, demonstrating our clear intention to align our criminal justice system with modern human rights standards. In 2021, we went further by ratifying the second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which reinforces our commitment to eventual abolition. Efforts to remove the death penalty from our Constitution have been substantial. The 2020 draft Constitution, developed through broad national consultations, proposed the full abolition of capital punishment. Despite not securing the required parliamentary majority, the proposal reflected strong national consensus. A similar proposal in the 2024 revised draft Constitution faced procedural setbacks, but not because of disagreements on the death penalty. In fact, the National Assembly has shown consistent support for abolition. However, we recognize that constitutional change must be supported by public understanding. During consultations, some citizens expressed concerns relating to public security and justice for victims. These views remind us that abolition is not only a legal exercise. It requires sustained public engagement, education, and trust in the justice system. Civil society, religious leaders, our national human rights institutions all play vital roles in fostering this understanding. Across Africa, momentum towards abolition continues to grow. Some African states have recently removed capital punishment from their laws, proving that justice, security, and respect for life can coexist. The Gambia is proud to stand with this movement. We remain committed to maintaining the moratorium, advancing further reforms, and building national consensus that reflect compassion, fairness, and sanctity of human life. There is ample evidence worldwide that death penalty often affects the poor and marginalized most severely. It is a punishment that cannot be reversed and is too frequently applied in a discriminatory manner. As Nelson Mandela reminded us, a nation is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable citizens. Abolition is therefore not only a legal reform, it is a moral and human imperative. Distinguished participants, our direction is clear. The Gambia will continue working towards the complete abolition of capital punishment. We will strengthen our justice institutions, promote restorative justice, and engage our citizens in an honest and inclusive national dialogue. Our commitment is firm. Our actions are guided by the belief that justice must always respect human dignity. Let us continue to work together until the death penalty is eliminated everywhere and for all time. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Grazie mille.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Thank you for your statement. Thank you for all of your work on constitutional reforms. Thank you for what you shared with us. Thank you for ratifying the second optional protocol. And thank you for all of your work towards the abolition, towards the de jure abolition in your country. Thank you for mentioning that your country also, since 2018, has declared a de facto moratorium in your country. And this choice has stayed firm to date, and you're in fact working to change the Constitution. Thank you very much for your remarks, sir. Before we take a break, I want to thank the Chamber of Deputies staff for all of their support during this event of ours. Thank you very much for making yourselves available. And I also wish to thank the Auxilium Cooperative, represented here by Angelo Curazzo, its founder. Thank you for your support to our conference, and thank you for supporting the community of Sant'Egidio's initiatives against the death penalty. Thank you very much for your attention, and we will take a break now, and we will reconvene at 11:30. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you for being back on time. What that proves is that we believe in what we're doing, and that our discussion deserves to be continued and deepened. This morning, we have been discussing a topic which I don't think we can say we love, although it is something that we'd like to make progress on together. The world's attitude has changed. I remember that in 2014, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, had already declared that the death penalty is useless, unfair, it is incompatible with human rights, and it has no space in the 21st century. Throughout the 1900s, throughout the 20th century, the Catholic Church, progressively through all of its pontiffs, had helped Christians and the world to understand that the death penalty is inadmissible. It always is, since it is an attack to the dignity of the person, which applies to Christians and to everybody else, of course. So this morning, we will continue. We will be heading back to Africa, and we will be giving the floor to the Minister of Justice and Human Rights of Angola, Mr. Marci Claudio Lopes. Marci Claudio Lopes, since 2022, has also been Minister for the Administration of the Territory and Secretary for Constitutional and Parliamentary Affairs at the Presidency of the Republic of Angola, which is a country we love just as much as we love Mozambique, because the civil war in Angola lasted for the same time that the terrible civil war in Mozambique lasted, and now the new Angola is joining us. You have the floor, sir.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Excellencies, Mr. Marco Impagliazzo, President of the Community of Sant'Egidio, distinguished ministers, distinguished representatives of the various states present, distinguished representatives of the international organizations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to extend my warmest greetings to all of you. First of all, we wish to greet all those present, and especially to His Excellency, the President of the Community of Sant'Egidio. We wish to express our gratitude for having invited us to attend this very important event. Distinguished participants, it is essential to underscore that human life is the most supreme legal asset. It is the foundation of all of the other rights as recognized by the Angolan legal system. The expression, "There can be no justice without life," I think translates a fundamental principle of the democratic state, of the rule of law, according to which justice can only be accomplished when there is the factual protection of life and human dignity. Excellencies, the Constitution of the Republic of Angola, in line with all institutional instruments regarding human rights as ratified by the country, namely the African Charter for Human Life and the Rights of Peoples, and the International Pact on Civil and Political Rights, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, states that life as the supreme value cannot be violated according to its Article 30. It is an essential element for the creation of a fair, free, and equal society. This principle states that the state has a duty of protecting all human beings, guaranteeing that all human beings can live in safety, dignity, and respect. And the defense of life is closely linked to the fundamental dignity of a human being, which guides our Constitution and the actions of our public institutions. Protecting life implies preventing any form of violation, but it also means promoting conditions aimed at ensuring a dignified existence. This includes access to basic services, opportunities, and guarantees, allowing every citizen to fully develop his or her abilities and to live in well-being. Therefore, the protection of life, as outlined by our Constitution, is not just a legal duty. It is also a moral and institutional commitment for human development, for social justice, and for the respect of the human condition. Ladies and gentlemen, the death penalty does not exist in Angola because our state's commitment to a good life is full. so much so that the dignity of the human person is enshrined in our Constitution, which means that we cannot revert when it comes to respecting life and preserving it. Justice, envisaged as the fulfillment of law and equality, can only achieve its full meaning when it is truly in the service of life. And therefore, the Constitution of the Republic of Angola reiterates that our country is a democratic state which respects the rule of law and which is committed to building a free, fair, and solidarity-based society. And therefore, we wish to reiterate, especially this year, during which Angola celebrates its 50th anniversary of independence, that we are firmly committed to the defense of life as we honor this cause, which is of international relevance. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And we truly need Africa. And Africa in a few years' time, or in a matter of years, became the second continent in the world to have abolished the death penalty. Only 4 countries had abolished the death penalty a few years ago, and now it's 30. And I'd like to give the floor to Yusuf Tom, Minister of Justice of Chad, who is Chad is the 29th country to have abolished the death penalty in Africa. Thank you for joining us, sir. The minister is a judge. He was also a general inspector at the Ministry of Justice, and he is the Minister of Justice since February 2025, after having led the independent authority in the struggle against corruption. You have the floor, sir.
You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Honorables députés, messieurs les ministres, distingués invités, c'est avec un...
Dear guests, with a deep sense of duty and great emotion that I take the floor before you here in Rome, this universal city, place of convergence of civilization, and a place where most of the contemporary legal thinking has formed. I would like to convey to the community of Sant'Egidio the fraternal greetings from the Republic of Chad, and I would like to thank the community of Sant'Egidio for the kind invitation and for the organization of this 15th International Conference on the Moratorium of the Death Penalty. We're not here today by chance. We are here convinced that there's a moral urgency, a humanitarian need. Victor Hugo used to say, and I quote, that the death penalty is the sign and eternal token of barbaric practices. These words are still very topical today, in a time in which the international community is continuing to put efforts to have life prevail over death, to have justice prevail over revenge, humanity over violence. This 15th Congress fits into the continuity of a long collective path towards the universal abolition of the death penalty. Every meeting, every debate, every resolution that's been adopted represents a step forward towards a world where the state will never have the power to take life. Honorable members of Parliament, dear colleagues, dear friends, dear attendants, the history of the death penalty in Chad reflects a long journey, sometimes difficult, but always guided by the desire to reconcile national security with respect for fundamental rights. With independence in 1960, the 1967 Criminal Code included the death penalty among the main criminal sanctions. This legislation, inherited from a context marked by instability, reflected the challenges facing our young state at the time. Later, in 2015, terrorist attacks that struck our territory with unprecedented brutality led to the adoption of Law Number 34 of 2015, allowing capital punishment for terrorist acts. This decision was difficult, but dictated by the gravity of the situation, and it was made in response to an immediate need to protect the population. However, and I want to stress it, the government of Chad never considered this measure to be a final goal, but rather an emergency response at a time of profound national vulnerability. In a spirit of responsibility and progress, our country has undertaken a profound reform of its legal framework. Thus, the revision of the Criminal Code and the Code of Criminal Proceedings in 2017 led to the abolition of the death penalty for all common law offences. This major development paved the way for an even more significant transformation. In fact, Law Number 003 of 2020, adopted on the 20th of May 2020, has abolished the death penalty once and for all, including for acts of terrorism. Through this act, Chad has courageously affirmed that life is a fundamental right, that even the most serious crimes cannot justify the irreversible removal of this right, and that the true justice cannot be achieved through destruction. As Nelson Mandela said, to take a life is to deny a person any chance of redemption. It is this principle that now guides the actions of the Chadian justice system. Honourable members of Parliament, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, abolishing the death penalty is not a political stance. It is an ethical, political, and above all humane approach. Modern justice is not measured by its ability to strike the most vulnerable or to imitate the violence it condemns. It is measured by its ability to prevent, protect, educate, and where possible, rehabilitate. To those who still have doubts, let us remember the words of Martin Luther King Jr. Violence never destroys violence, it only adds to it. The death penalty is the ultimate violence, a violence that nothing can repair. It doesn't strengthen society, it does not reduce crime, it does not console victims. It closes the door to any possibility of transformation. Alternatives exist, such as long-term imprisonment, enhanced prevention measures, de-radicalization, and rehabilitation programs. These ensure public safety while preserving the very essence of humanity, i.e. dignity. Chad is fully committed today, alongside all states, organizations and actors mobilized for the universal abolition of the capital punishment. But we know that this fight cannot be won alone. It requires constant cooperation, active solidarity, the sharing of experiences, and enhanced international coordination. That is why, under the auspices of the community of Sant'Egidio, I'm inviting you to promote joint initiatives, reform justice, capacity building, alternative communal policies, or technical exchanges between our institutions. And that is precisely what we are doing here today. We are here to join our forces, pooling our intelligence and combining our wills to build a fairer world. Because when nations listen to each other, help each other, and combine their efforts, no obstacle is insurmountable. When states stand together to defend life, victory becomes a certainty rather than a distant hope. Ladies and gentlemen, our generation bears the historic responsibility of getting rid of the death penalty worldwide. We must be, in the words of Kofi Annan, vigilant guardians of human dignity. By abolishing capital punishment, we are affirming a choice, the choice to believe that every human being, even those who have failed, still carries within them a spark of dignity. The choice to believe that justice is not built on death, but on life. The choice to believe that humanity only progresses when it refuses to adopt the methods it condemns. Honourable members of Parliament, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, I would like to express my deep admiration for the community of Sant'Egidio, for its tireless commitment towards peace, dialogue, and the promotion of human rights. Your work, often discreet but powerful, patient but determined, contributes every day to bringing humanity closer to this horizon of justice and light. By joining our voices, our convictions, and our will, we can make the universal abolition of the death penalty not a dream, but a tangible reality. For, as Mahatma Gandhi said, non-violence is the greatest force available to humanity. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. We are continuing to learn one from another. Our generation has the responsibility, the historic responsibility, to free the world from this ancient and dark company. The experience of Angola is giving us another important food for thought. During terrorism, Angola introduced a piece of legislation fighting that crime temporarily, though, being aware that it was going to be temporary. And in 2017, they started the abolition of the death penalty process. So there couldn't be any better suggestion than this to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister and incumbent Minister of Foreign Affairs, Antonio Tajani. Before giving the floor to him, I would like to remind you that there are many ways to get to the abolition of the death penalty. There's a gradual approach, and the community of Sant'Egidio is in favor of a gradual approach towards the abolition of the death penalty. It is the spirit of the resolution of the General Assembly that is calling for a universal moratorium towards the abolition. There are many ways, as I was saying, many steps that can be taken to improve our life in prison, to create transparency in no more secrets in the judicial system, to facilitate visits, spiritual assistance, to humanize life also in the death row, to be reminded us all that we are dealing with human beings, even those who are guilty, and to exclude the death penalty rule out the death penalty for children, for minors, for people with disabilities, for women with children. These are all steps that can be taken to commute capital punishment into certain imprisonments and sentences without death, to declare moratorium de facto or de jure, to support with a favorable vote the UN resolution for a universal moratorium, new laws supporting the families of the victims, more protection for young children and women to prevent the crimes of rape and violence, that sometimes disrupt the public opinion and force them to ask for capital punishment. The ratification of international treaties like the Second Optional Protocol on Civil and Political Crimes, the abolition of the death penalty for ordinary crimes, also in time of war, and the total prohibition, the transposition of all these in our constitutions as foreseen by the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, also for crimes against humanity and genocide. These are all steps that can be taken, and every country knows how to do it. One very last thing. Many are aware that there's the a problem of accompanying the public in this journey, but I would like to remind you also that we need leadership to do so, and that every political class, every ruler need to help their population rather than having them follow with likes or with polls or with surveys. We don't have to expect the whole population to be in favor, because laws also have an educational power. Now that I've given some time to our foreign minister, I would like to hand the floor over to him. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank Sant'Egidio for this initiative, and I would like to thank you for the kind invitation. I would like to welcome the Minister of Justice of Angola, the Minister from Zimbabwe, Zayambe, and all the authorities that are present here today to talk about a theme that is universal in nature. But we'll start with a question we should all ask ourselves. Why say no to the death penalty? Because many, when faced with terrible crimes, believe that the death penalty could be a deterrent or could prevent such crimes from happening again. And unfortunately, there are crimes like these in the world. Whereas I think that the death penalty is not a deterrent nor a solution, because I'm against the death penalty, and the Italian government is against the death penalty, has been against it forever, regardless of our political affiliations, because life is a right. Life is a right that we have, and that has been bestowed on us since our birth. For believers, it's coming from God. For non-believers, well, it's, chance that grants us this right. Anyway, the right to life comes before the right of the state, any state, to give rules. So, the right not to be killed by anyone, not even by the state, is a right that is part of human nature. And it is an inalienable right. This is the principle whereby we must be against the death penalty from a moral, ethical, cultural standpoint. Because the right to life is a right that no one, not even the state, can take from us. Starting from this assumption, we should think about what we can do to help the world get rid of the death penalty. Starting from another assumption, and I'm saying this to our foreign guests, a reform of the justice system has been approved. There's going to be a referendum because there's a debate underway. And there are many cases that are being mentioned in the political debate today of judicial errors. So people that have been accused of murder, terrible murder, and after 30 years in jail have proven to be innocent. Well, if those people had been sentenced to death instead of life punishment, life imprisonment. Who could have given them back their most precious gift, i.e. life? It is already very difficult to compensate them for the many years they have lost by spending time in prison. It's very difficult to compensate the family, to compensate the children. And this is in the case of judicial errors, and it's many of them. Not even one innocent should be sentenced to jail, and not even one innocent, even more so, should be killed. So this doesn't mean to be too permissive or being unwilling to counter crime, because of course we have to punish people that have proven guilty of perpetrating crimes, but there should be fair trials. So people believe that criminals might be scared by the fact that the capital punishment is part of a country's legislation. But on top of the proposals made by Sant'Egidio, I think we should also add a faster judicial process, the certainty of punishment, which must always be, depriving people of their freedom and not of their dignity. But sometimes trials take too long. Well, people say, well, they've been arrested, but then released after 2 minutes. So maybe we should have harsher punishment. Yes, that might maybe serve the purpose, but capital punishment, never. We should do certain things to guarantee security to our children, safety and security, not only psychological, but also physical, because there's too much violence. So fast justice, and those who are guilty have to serve their sentence till the very end, and all the other things that the community of Sant'Egidio is proposing.
Nell'intervento molto chiaro.
And very clearly so, I know. They have been proposed by Marazziti on behalf of Sant'Egidio, so we can fully share them. Of course, we are all against it, but we can't believe that things could change overnight. But we could embark on a journey to get there in a few years, to get to a positive solution. It's true that this path is proving more and more successful, because every year there's an increasing number of countries that vote in favor of the moratorium. This is a very positive indicator, because it means that in the global public there's more understanding of a useless punishment, because it is ascertained that when there's capital punishment as part of a country's legal system, there are no fewer crimes. So it has no deterrent action. So it's no easy task. We have to convince the public, so it's good that we talk about it, but we must also work to guarantee security, to guarantee safety. We must not be scared by the fact that there are security policies also in big cities where there's violence, so prevention, training. And then all the things that Sant'Egidio is proposing for inmates, which I fully share 100%. So we must also diffuse in the public the fear of crime. So to let the governments contribute to make people better understand there's no need to ask for capital punishment if the crime is particularly ruthless. It's an international work. The fact that we have so many ministers from as many countries here is very important. Sant'Egidio is a Christian organization, so the church could contribute as well. to explain what's the right to life. I would like to say something on people that have been sentenced to death. There are also a few innocent people that are in death row, but they shouldn't be considered as rejects of society. Prison is always a place where people are stripped of their liberty. But they're never stripped of their dignity. They must never be stripped of their dignity. Life and dignity are two things that cannot be touched. So even convicts or inmates, even those who are not sentenced to death, should be treated in a way that their dignity is respected. And this is key also to accompany them to capital punishment for those who have been sentenced to death, hoping that it is not going to happen again. So there's a great work to do. We are ready to support any initiative in this regard on behalf of the Italian government, and I'm convinced of the validity of this approach. My mother taught me. I was a kid. I was 6 to 7 years old, and I remember my mother saying, "No, please, no to the death penalty." And I always fought against the death penalty, regardless of who the promoter of this battle was. No One Touches Cain, for example, is a movement affiliated to a left-wing party. So we have to be against death penalty, which doesn't mean to be permissive, as I said, in terms of what security and safety means. Well, quite the contrary. It means to advocate security while respecting the dignity of the individual, which is the first thing we should do. So I believe that initiatives like this are definitely very useful. Europe is an example of all this. It's the only country, the only continent in the world where there's no death penalty. And we, as Italians, also in the 3-year period 2026-2028, we will be full members of the Council of Human Rights of the UN. We could maybe exploit this role to further consolidate our commitment. So I'd say that things are going for the better, that the results are there. We're at least going in the right direction. We must have the resolve to continue, not to be afraid of difficulties. We are ready to cooperate, to further promote security, justice with all countries in Africa as well. So we are ready to contribute with our know-how also to projects like the Falcone and Borsellino one, so to export our know-how in the fight against crime, because I always go back to the question of security. We must give certainties to our citizens. They should be certain that there's an alternative to the death penalty that guarantees their safety even more than that. In one of my recent trips to Senegal, Niger and Mali with Minister Piantedosi, we talked about this as well. So in this respect, Italy is ready to offer all its knowledge to countries that are friends, to build a journey that is always centered on the dignity of the individual. So in conclusion, dear friends, I'm pretty optimistic. I'm convinced that those who want to give to the state a right no one has given it will not prevail, because the right of the individual supersedes the right of the state. So let's move on together, let's cooperate, let's grant all the necessary support to make sure that in the world this vision can prevail. A vision of the individual, the dignity of the individual, with the ultimate goal of saving human lives. There were 2 people sentenced to life imprisonment, 2 killers from the mafia. They participated in an event. I was there as a speaker, and they said, we repented of everything we did. We recognized the fact that the sentence we got is just, so we are not challenging the fact that we got life imprisonment, but in jail we are working to help other people be redeemed and to live better and to restore their relationship with their family and with society. We want to be at peace with our conscience. Despite the evil we have made to many people, these were killers that had killed many people. Well, if these people had been sentenced to death, they could not have been redeemed. They could have not helped other people. No, they could not. So I'm a believer, so I always believe that as long as we are alive, we can still repent or make amends. But let's set the spiritual side apart. Even if you are in jail and you are repented, well, you can help others. Why preventing others from helping? Why can't we believe that also in the most evil of man there's some good? There's the possibility to be redeemed and to make amends. This should be the glimpse of hope. This should lead us all to put our efforts in getting rid of the death penalty, of course, with a moratorium first, but with the ultimate goal of abolition as the final goal. Thank you.
Il ministro degli esteri è riuscito a venire.
The Minister for Foreign Affairs was able to join us, although he has to be in Milan in 1.5 hours. So he really has to leave us.
Yeah, all the ministers, we will take a picture together. Then he can go. Please come. Sì, di sotto.
Okay.
We are here.
Okay, no problem.
You know, politicians want the chair.
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
I used to be in this parliament, Italian parliament, 2013, 2018.
Okay.
Human Rights Committee, Foreign Affairs, and then Francesco. Come ha ricordato il ministro Tajani,
As Minister Tajani said, the penalty, the necessary penalty, sometimes is removing one's freedom, never dignity.
to say that Pakistan commuted an incredible amount of death sentences, so we want to congratulate with Pakistan. And e mi ha sempre colpito per
And I was always personally struck by the fact that Nelson Mandela, in 1964, during the Runa trial, the death penalty had been asked, although the life sentence was emitted and he was freed in 1990. Had the court decided to apply the death penalty, we would never have had Nelson Mandela and South Africa, and we would never have overcome apartheid with the end of violence, nor would we have had a different type of restorative justice as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Therefore, the death penalty has to be eliminated for that reason as well. We are heading towards the conclusion of this meeting of ours, although we still have two very important parts left. We will be helped in our conclusions by the president of the community of Sant'Egidio, Mr. Marco Impagliazzo, but this morning we also have understood that there is no direct link between the number of crimes and the number of death penalties. The two things, statistically speaking, are two curves which never intersect and which have nothing to do with each other. For example, think of the example of a country we love, and we love all countries of the world. Think of the United States. In the U.S., 1/4 of all of the death sentences in recent years happened in Texas. And all of these death sentences happened in 2 counties alone out of 254 counties, which means that 1/4 of all of the death sentences in the U.S. happens in 2 counties out of 3,142 counties on all of the United States of America, although violence happens everywhere. What that means is that the death penalty does not depend on the crimes. It means that safety linked to the death penalty doesn't depend on the seriousness of the offenses. It simply depends on geography. Justice cannot depend on geography. And that is something which I think applies to every country. And what is also important is that at the end of the 1700s, an Italian had already published a booklet on crimes and penalties, Cesare Beccaria, on crimes and punishment, rather. And this small booklet had a very simple message. What it said was, it isn't the horror or the cruelty of the punishment which can convince criminals to refrain from committing the crime. It is the certainty of the punishment which can. You don't need a horrible punishment. You need the certainty of punishment, always and for everyone. And I'll say it again. The punishment is the deprivation of freedom as a way of learning how to return the evil committed, or to repair for the evil committed vis-a-vis society. But there cannot be a further punishment to the inhumanity of prison. And punishment is never linked to evil in jail. It is linked to the deprivation of freedom. Now, before we conclude, I'd like to give the floor to a country which is very important for us here in the West, the United States, and I'd like to ask George Kane, who comes from Connecticut and who has had a very special experience.
Please, George. Darci.
I'd like to ask him to give us a taste, give us a flavor of what is happening in the United States, and if he has any reason to believe that the death penalty can be stopped.
To hear you, even if you are not in the program, I want to give you the floor, and to give the floor to the United States to listen for a minute, for a few minutes, what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Sometimes it's better to not be part of the program. Distinguished ministers, distinguished representatives, colleagues, distinguished guests, the community of Sant'Egidio, my fellow clergy, and ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to be here today and to address you, having been given about 2 hours' notice that I'd be speaking today, but it is an honor nonetheless to be here with you in Rome once again, the eternal city and the eternal city of my church as well. I'd like to extend my warmest greetings and gratitude to all of you for being here and for the honor to be able to speak. I'm actually here in place of another speaker from the United States who is not able to be with us here this morning because she is ill. And Deborah Milkey, who I must recognize here publicly, an exoneree from the state of Arizona, who spent 25 years in prison for a crime that she didn't commit, and separated from her family on the false accusation that she killed her 4-year-old son. Imagine living through that horror for 25 years in prison. Deborah is here in Italy, but again, she is ill and not able to be with us. And I certainly can't tell you her story, but let me tell you a little bit about my story. I'm a retired police commissioner and was responsible for exercising the law in the United States in my home state of Connecticut for over 40 years. And when I started in my role as a police commissioner, and when I started as a role working working in the criminal justice system, I supported the death penalty. I thought having the death penalty was a good thing. I thought that it kept me safe, that people would think twice before they would try to kill me for fear of death. I thought that I was helping victims by supporting the death penalty so that they would get the justice that they deserved. And I also thought that having a death penalty would make the world a safer place. And after a short few years working, I realized that every single one of those thoughts was beginning to fall apart in front of me. I learned over a short period of time that I was wrong. I learned that the death penalty did not keep me safe. I learned that it didn't help victims. I learned that it didn't make the world any safer. And most importantly, that the death penalty did not respect life. How did this happen? I have to give my divine creator credit, because I know the majority of it was from divine inspiration. And look at me now. But I also did my research, and I started to see the things that were wrong with the death penalty. And I started reading, and I started writing, and I started learning. And I realized that violence does not stop violence. A justice that kills can never be a justice that protects. The harm that came to victims' families, that I was responsible for being a part of, because I, like the system that I worked in, said to people who were victims of crimes, you will feel better when the person who killed your loved one is executed. Your pain will go away. You will rise to new life. And the more surviving family victim members that I spoke to told me and showed me, you are wrong. In fact, having a death penalty has made it harder for me to gain control of my life. All these years that I have been waiting to feel better, waiting for the person to be executed, has stolen my life from me. And here I thought that I was doing the right thing, and I was doing the wrong thing. The false promises of closure, the false promises that you'll feel better. I realized that I needed to stop lying to people, that what I was doing was hurting them. The oath that I swore to uphold the law and to protect people was crumbling underneath me because I was failing to meet my obligation. So I got involved in the anti-death penalty movement. People ask me all the time, well, when did your mind finally change? I can't tell you when. It took a period of time. It didn't happen overnight. But I knew when I got to the place that I needed to get that it was the right thing to do. And a lot of it had to do with my meeting the surviving family victim members, the people that I was sworn to protect, that I was causing more harm in their lives. What's happening in the United States now is nothing short of shameful. I was here in 2012 at a time when 4 states in the United States in a period of 5 years had abolished the death penalty. And then shortly after that, another 4 states in a period of 5 years abolished the death penalty. And we are at a place now in the United States where our violence has crept back into our psyche. It's crept back into who we think we are. That might makes right. And we are destroying people's lives. We are destroying American citizens' lives. What's happening in the United States right now is a war on the American people because of the policies and procedures that are going on. Our immigrant friends who are suffering, the people who we love and who love our country, are being vilified and demonized. And what we're doing is wrong. The fact that in our federal system, before President Trump left office the first time, he executed 13 people in a period of a year when we hadn't had a federal execution in 17 years before that. And now states are beginning to ramp up their executions again. They've almost been given permission again to become more violent by what's happening around them. And now we've resorted to using nitrous oxide, gassing people to death as an alternative measure to lethal injection. We've brought back the firing squad. What is happening to us? And this is why I said last night at the Coliseum, we need our young people to step up and to change the direction that the world is in right now in the United States. We need them to be a force, to unify, and they want that. Our young people want that. They are as disillusioned at what's happening in the United States as any one of us here. So, in closing, I'm honored to be here with you, but I must say to you, please pray for us. We need your prayers. We need your support. We need to stop a reemergence of the cycle of violence that for a period of 10 years or so, we began to change. We began to take the focus off the violence and onto healing. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
I'm very grateful to be a part of this wonderful community of Sant'Egidio and for their kind invitation for me to be here and to be with all of you here today. So let us continue our pursuit of true justice, of true healing, of true binding wounds, and bringing our people and our countries together once again.
Grazie.
Thank you.
We will. We will. Ieri al Colosseo abbiamo
And last night at the Colosseum, we asked for a sign of the culture of life to Governor Newsom. He had the courage of closing a death row in California in 2019, although there are still 573 human beings who are sentenced to death.
take the lead in this culture of life. Commute all these sentences. You will help the world and the United States to choose for life. Thank you. La parola adesso.
And I think we can applaud at this point, since this is a desire the Congress has. It is a desire the movement has. And now, I'd like to give the floor to Professor Marco Impagliazzo, President of the community of Sant'Egidio, who we wish to thank for all of his work in this field in humanizing the world in so many ways.
Sono io che ringrazio per questa felice occasione.
Thank you for this great opportunity to be together again. Especially here at the lower house of parliament, the Italian parliament. We wanted to have this conference here because we believe it is very meaningful to be in the ultimate place where laws are passed and also to try to find solutions to this big problem that the world is facing. So I would like to thank all the speakers for the contributions I've heard this morning. I would like to start from the representative of the Swiss Confederation, Ms. Schmidt-Tartagli, and for the support we always find in Switzerland in this battle for civilization. The same is true for Ambassador Eastwood from the Principality of Monaco. Thank you for your kind words when you said that the world can continue also in the heart of crisis. That's true. That's very true. So we are trying to make the world move on, especially in the heart of this huge crisis, the crisis of war, third world war, the piecemeal war, as Pope Francis used to say. So the conference we opened today in Rome, that it is about to end, as we've heard, is part of a broader campaign for the moratorium on the executions. It was launched at the UN many years ago with the support of our country, the support of Italy, and I would like to thank Minister Tajani for being with us today. This moratorium sums up in a single reflection countries that are abolitionists, de jure and de facto, and retentionist countries. So this is the model that Sant'Egidio has been using for the past few years, the way to defend life, that we can find only together if we are open to dialogue. The minister from Chad explained beautifully that no obstacle is unsurmountable if we work together. The Minister of Justice from Mozambique talked about progressive approaches, so to get to certain results. So in many of the contributions I've heard this morning, it emerged very clearly that being together, as Minister Tajani said, is the true answer. So Sant'Egidio is promoting a reflection that continues to be made by abolitionist countries, either de jure or de facto, but also retentionists. A reflection that was launched also in the past few years on this doubling of evils, so punishment as a doubling of evils, so the illusion that the right answer lies in repeating the same modality that have led to the injustice in the first place. The role of justice is to express something other than the negative event it is opposing. So there's a sort of asymmetry between the crime and the punishment. So a necessary, symmetry between punishment and crime. And we wondered what it means to deal with the abolition of the death penalty in a time of strength, dominated by war, dominated by emotions that sweep away our souls and that lead to visceral decisions, even hysterical ones. I said yesterday that if making peace seems so difficult today, talking about abolition of the capital punishment might seem naive or at least not so important, but we believe that the death penalty is the juridically justified symbol of the dehumanization of the world. It is a mentality that believes that evil must be eradicated only by perpetrating other evil, and you need to respond to violence with violence. I won't repeat the many things we heard this morning with great depth. Mario Marazzini explained very clearly how the death penalty is used also for political reasons. And he also explained with many examples, like the one from Japan, how the culture of life, building the culture of life, is the biggest response we can give to the death penalty, to the culture of death. In Asia, in the US, but not only there, we need to win the institutions over, to make them understand the reasons of life and the reasons of humanity, to help them find in the respect of human life the deep root of every policy that aims to common good. We need to heal the peoples from the fascination of revenge. Even when executions are decreasing, there are too many killings, extrajudicial killings, lynching, especially in Latin America and in Africa. But, in this latter continent, we've got many representatives of African countries. In Africa, thanks to the conferences we have promoted over the past few years, important progress has been observed that makes us hope in the liberation of all the countries in Africa from the death penalty in a not so distant future. So Sant'Egidio is looking with optimism at the many abolitionist countries, de jure or de facto, that are not practicing the capital punishment any longer. We have heard about the numbers. I won't repeat them. I don't want to talk at length. But our optimism is based on the conviction that the future must not be left in the hands of violence, albeit legal, and to the death penalty. And we believe it is important to keep the hope alive. because it's this hope that we need. And I'm saying this on behalf of the many victims, of the many people that have been sentenced to death and they are still in death rows today. This attempt is a legitimate way to resist to the lowering of the ethical standards in the world, as already happened in the past for slavery and torture. Our campaign is a battle for justice around capital punishment. All the weaknesses are concentrated of the weaknesses of the judicial systems, and we want to fight together to put a stopper to the culture of death, that culture that takes for granted the killings of civilians during wars, that accepts collateral damage, that sends to die people that are mistreated in jails. I hope that this conference is an encouragement to fight this battle, to win this battle, and to respond to the invitation extended by our beloved Pope Francis, who used to say all Christians, all men of goodwill should fight to have the death penalty abolished, being it illegal or legal. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you. Hope to Mahini in Swahili. Let's win back our future. Let's not leave it to pessimism and to a culture of death. With this commitment, we conclude this morning and this Congress of the Justice Ministers. Thank you very much.